Fantasy Football League podcast. I'm your host, Joey Tysick, along with my partner, Joe Johnson. As always, we're in the final week of the fantasy regular season.
Here we go.
We are 1 week away from the start of the playoffs, and what does the NFL bless us with but a giant bye week for 6 NFL teams. 6 of the best offenses, too, are on this bye week. I know the Ravens are one of the top ones that are on bye this week. The Bills are not on bye now. And so, the Commanders are on bye. So, as we'll see, it's going to be kind of crazy. It's another bye-apocalypse.
Here we go. It's Ravens, Broncos, Texans, Colts, Patriots, and Commanders.
Yeah. So, about 4 of those teams have some big fantasy implications, I would say. And, so it's tough. But luckily for this league, the ONTV League, the standings are already set. We've already hit all the teams that are going to make the playoffs. There was a couple scenarios last week that if they would have played out, it could have been like a 3-horse race. But the 6 teams are in the playoffs, so now it's just fighting for seeding. There's a couple spots up for grabs. Yeah, the second bye. So the top 2 teams get a bye, and the second place team is still undetermined at the moment. So that could be a big game for those two.
Front runner, you think? Ian's ingenious team, or Tracy pretty much has secured the number 1 bye, right?
Yes. Yeah. She's the number 1 seed. Let me pull up the standings.
I'm guessing it's going to be
on the
Ian,
laptop.
but I'm not sure.
At the moment, I would think so, but yeah, you never know these days because Marie's going to get Malik this week, and we know Malik's been winning with a not full roster, but he is going to be heavily affected by week 14, so Marie might get a free win here. So if Sammy can get another win to ruin somebody's seeding, then Ian would fall to 3rd, and he would have to play in the first round of the playoffs, and Marie would get a bye.
Oh, wow.
So it could work out in her favor that she's playing Malik at the right time. And, because Tracy's 9-4, so she automatically gets a bye. And then Ian and Marie are both 8-5. There is the weird scenario that both Ian and Marie lose, and I would get into the bye.
Wow.
But I would have to score, let's see. I would have to outscore Ian by 12 points this week as well because of tiebreakers.
Well, I'm going to do everything I can to keep that from happening.
And so I guess that's the other last scenario is that if Marie and Ian both win, Ian does hold the tiebreaker. So his percentage is definitely higher of getting that second seed in the coveted bye. But yeah, it's been crazy, and I don't know. I'm just happy to make the playoffs. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our motivation all year long was just to not be one of those bottom 2 teams, and the season starts fresh at the beginning of the playoffs. But really, you're going in with momentum, and my team has 0 momentum. So I'm really not expecting to advance much past the first round. If I do, it'll be a miracle. I did get Pacheco back, and he's been cautiously working his way into the game plan. But, I have a lot of stars on my team that just underperformed this past week, and I'm just not optimistic. I don't have any momentum heading into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a weird season overall, and that's I think why I don't really care about seeding, because it feels like any given week it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the nice thing about fantasy is if you make the playoffs, you can make a run. You got to get a little lucky at times. So this is the time to do it. So looking at last week's matchup, as to no surprise, Tracy was the highest scoring team of the week.
After coming off the lowest scoring of the week, where she put up like 60-something points.
Right.
She was obviously devastated by buys last week, but now she shows what her team can do at full strength.
Yeah, having Cincinnati players back in her lineup was a pretty big deal, as we can see right away. Joe Burrow right back to, his normal 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He did lose 2 fumbles though, so he lost some big points there if it would have been close. But Justin Jefferson got back on track. Jamar Chase has been like very consistent all year long, along with Joe Mixon going over 100 yards again and a touchdown. Kamara having a big game again with 112 rushing yards. Laporta having one of the weirdest stat lines of the week. 3 catches for 6 yards, but 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So even though she sat Kyle Pitts, I believe she had Kyle Pitts, right?
Yeah. He's on the bench with 0.
Because he wasn't injured though.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, he had 2
put up
targets.
0, but
so she just played it right. She went with Laporta. Maybe she wanted to have something to cheer about on Thanksgiving, and she made the right choice. Zay Flowers, pretty average day, 3 catches, 74 yards. Chase Brown continues to be really good ever since he's taken over the lead rushing role for the Bengals. Jake Bates, still very consistent, even though he did finally miss his first kick of the year.
Yeah.
And then the New York Jets defense getting a return touchdown, couple fumbles, 3 sacks in their loss to the Seattle Seahawks too, by the way, but putting up good points.
Looking at her starting lineup and even looking at her bench, the thing that's so terrifying about her team is in her starting lineup, there's not a single player who put up single digits.
Yeah.
Everybody put up double digits.
Mm-hmm.
Flowers was the lowest with 10 points. But
yeah,
when every member of your roster is contributing to your total score, it's hard to be beat.
Yeah, multiple people going over 100 yards, and if they didn't get 100 yards, they got a touchdown. And yeah, anytime you get double-digit points from your kicker and your defense, that's usually a good sign and a good week for most people. On the other side, Murray continues to play Patrick Mahomes, and he's been pretty good. Kind of had his worst game this past week that he has had in a while, and it was just because they didn't get very many passing touchdowns. They kicked a lot of field goals, so they came up short on a lot of things. CeeDee Lamb didn't really do much. He's been kind of banged up the last couple weeks, and with Cooper Rush at quarterback, it's just not. He's not playing at his best, but I would assume he'll bounce back and he'll do better. He's projected to still play, even though he's battling through, I believe, a shoulder injury. Mm-hmm. Cortland Sutton continues to be one of the hottest wide receivers out there right now, actually, going over 100 yards again last night in their win over the Browns. Derrick Henry, back-to-back pretty subpar games, not getting into the end zone, having 14 points again. It's good for a running back to get 14 points, but when you have a guy like Derrick Henry, you want more or you expect more.
Well, they talk about ceilings and floors when it comes to players. So even when Henry has a down day, his floor is still double digits. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you might be disappointed with 14 points, but that's better than half my squad. So.
DeAndre Swift, he's back to kind of bottom of the barrel. He had a strong upswing for a couple weeks, but they can't really do anything at this point. Now, they did play Detroit. Detroit's a really good run defense, so that might play a part of it. But DeAndre Swift has been struggling actually quite a bit recently. Travis Kelce, another solid game. Once again, though, similar to Derrick Henry, for a while, Travis Kelce was getting you like 20 points a game. So for him to kind of sort of regress is a little bit disappointing, especially on a game where he had 7 catches for 68 yards, but they just don't target him in the end zone right now. And so that's a little bit frustrating.
Well, that's one thing that Mahomes has been doing this season is spreading the ball around a little bit. He's always been so dependent on Kelce, but now you see, Worthy and his other receivers really stepping up. So he's able to spread the ball around more.
Yeah. Then DK Metcalf, I have him in one of my other leagues. He's been really frustrating lately. He had 9 targets in this game, but only 4 catches for 66 yards. He draws a lot of defensive pass interference penalties, so he doesn't get those catches. But Seattle's offense just looks off for some reason the last few weeks.
Yeah, even the running game, yeah.
Michael Pittman, he did okay, I guess. But when you have Anthony Richardson at quarterback, it's just hard to expect too much from their passing game. And realistically, Marie could have played Amari Cooper or Calvin Ridley. Neither of them did anything either. So it wasn't really a right decision for her last wide receiver spot. Maybe Najee Harris, but he's also one that he's been okay, but he hasn't been this good. So 24 points from him was a good week.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get from him week to week.
Yeah, so seeing him on the bench, Murray might change that this week because he did get six catches, which is pretty big for him. And then the one mistake she did say that she made was she was planning to play Chris Boswell. It was one of those waiver wire pickups that she just kind of forgot to swap out.
Yeah, and he's been on a tear.
Yeah, luckily it wouldn't have really made a difference, but just something that she told me about. So
yeah, you and I were talking about the kicker situation. Koo, he's been on a tear this whole season, and now a lot of the kickers that we've been, putting crowns on their heads saying they just can't miss from 50, they're all struggling all of a sudden. It's really odd. So Koo, for some reason, is right up there struggling alongside of Tucker and the Dallas kicker and
Brandon Aubrey.
They all seem to be missing, and not necessarily just from the 50, but like extra points and short yardage kicks. So it's weird how that's happening across the NFL.
Yeah, it's really weird because I feel like the distance that guys are kicking is more than it's ever been. I mean, the Patriots lined up for a record 68-yard field goal this past weekend, but yeah, there's something about the top guys. A lot of the most accurate guys historically are missing this year. Now, I don't know what it is, but it's pretty wild. So this was kind of a battle that could have been for a first place spot, and Tracy took it. So that's how she basically locked up one of those buys. The next highest scoring matchup was a close, tense matchup between me and Ian that I had to win late on Sunday night. It was all over by Sunday night. Didn't have anything going on Monday night, which was nice to see, honestly. And luckily for me, Justin Herbert for Ian did not have a great game. Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't do a whole lot on Thanksgiving. And then Mike Evans and Saquon Barkley, though, scared me for a while because they had big games. Mike Evans, 25 points in a game that went into overtime, 118 yards, 8 catches, and a touchdown.
He's back.
And then Saquon Barkley, he's been potentially league MVP to some people. Definitely one of the fantasy MVPs of the season. 107 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and 2 catches against a Baltimore defense that has been stopping the run consistently all season long.
That was another theme this past week where normally reliable defenses gave up a ton of yards, ton of points this week.
Yeah. And so in those games were the late window games. And by the time that those were over, Ian had taken the lead on me. And I think I was down. I mean, I would have been down about 25 points or something like that. 24, perhaps. And so I was a little bit nervous. Brock Bowers had another huge game. He's also in that fantasy MVP conversation just because where you drafted him. He's probably going to take over the Travis Kelce slot in next year's fantasy draft, to be honest.
I agree. He's going to be, if not a first rounder, a second rounder. And, I've seen experts say that he's going to be leading the tight end pack for years to come. He's just a monster out there.
Right. And a lot of people were concerned that could he make the jump from college because he was so dominant in college. Mm-hmm. And they thought, well, you never know when you get into the NFL. We've never, it's hard to track these tight ends and how they'll perform, but he's been spectacular for them. So putting up 30 points once again, I think that's the second 30-point game in 3 weeks or something like that. So, yeah, that was terrifying for me. Ramondre Stevenson having an okay game. Jaden Reed doing what he's been doing all season, 3 catches, but 2 touchdowns on 24 yards for 20 points. And then, like we said, Justin Tucker, he missed 2 field goals, and I think both were from 50.
Actually, I think he missed 3 because the 9 points would have been the difference in that game. The Ravens would have won had he nailed his kicks. Now, two of the misses, I do believe, were long ones, and one was a short one, but yeah, his misses cost the Ravens the game.
Right. And then, so for me, I had an okay afternoon. Cooper Kupp, terrible.
Yeah, that was shocking, man.
Yeah, the Rams just looked off for a while in that game. They finally got the running game going late, but it was just kind of a weird game in general. And then my Thanksgiving games did not start me off too well. Jahmyr Gibbs having a down game, lost a fumble even for only 10 points against Chicago. Malik Neighbors did all right. He got a lot of catches, but didn't do much with them because the Giants are just terrible. So he got 15 points, which isn't bad. And then the Thanksgiving cap off, though, that saved my day as Jonnu Smith has just been outstanding.
For a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
He's just come out of nowhere, and now all of a sudden you're hearing his name over and over.
Yeah, I think it's back-to-back weeks where he's had 10 catches, which is crazy. So he got 21 points to end my Thanksgiving, which was really nice for me. And then as we moved into Sunday, I kind of closed the gap with Bijan Robinson having a really good game, 102 yards and a touchdown with 6 catches for 25 points. T. Higgins getting a late touchdown against Pittsburgh in a shootout, which was surprising. He got me 18 points. And then
who could have predicted that the Steelers would put up those kind of numbers?
Yeah.
Over 400 yards passing from Wilson.
And
that's crazy.
That just shows you how bad the Cincinnati Bengals defense has been this year.
You can't pin it on the offense. The offense is putting up points, but the defense just can't stop anything.
Yeah, so even
400 yards.
Yeah, if you're giving up that many yards to Pittsburgh, it's rough. And then Kaimi Fairbairn continues to be a really solid kicker, but he has missed his fair share as well this season. But he got me 13 points. And then finally, Josh Allen might be the NFL MVP as well. And, man, this is why you draft Josh Allen. I know I took him really early this year, and that was kind of a new thing for me. But this is why you do it. These type of games. He got 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown.
So 2 touchdowns on one play at one point.
Yeah, I don't know how I saw Twitter was angry about that call because, ESPN scored it that way. Many and fantasy places or fantasy apps tend to follow what the NFL does, which is what ESPN follows. So everybody was like, how did he get 2 touchdowns for that? That shouldn't be allowed. And people were up in arms because I'm sure people lost their match because of it.
Yeah. My personal opinion, even though it was a fun play and, you're witnessing history because he's the first quarterback to get a rushing, passing, and receiving touchdown in one game. But when you look at the replay, Amari Cooper, who caught the pass, his forward progress was stopped. The refs could have whistled that play dead. Instead, he pitches the ball and it goes in for a touchdown. So you can argue that point. But here's the takeaway that I got from that game is, prior to the game, you saw video of the stadium full of snow, and they're like, BYOS, bring your own shovel to dig your seat out, which people did.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, I'm going to go with the defenses in this game because it's snowy and it's going to be hard to move the ball. That was not the case for Buffalo, man. They looked like kids playing in a snowy field, some backyard football. They were having a blast, and that double touchdown play was just an example of that these look like kids out there having fun in the snow.
Yeah. Well, that's why the other thing that I saw on Twitter after people were complaining is they were also just talking about like how good Josh Allen played in the snow.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look at me. I'm Josh Allen. I'm one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I just got engaged to Haley Steinfeld. Oh, look at me. And it's just one of those things that it was funny to see.
Living the life.
Yeah, and everything's just going right for the Bills right now. And, he got me 28 points. Now, the good thing is, even if there was by chance a stat correction to take away the passing touchdown, that would take away 4 points, and I would still win the matchup.
Yeah.
So that made me feel a little bit better because if there was a stat correction and I lost, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would have been a little disappointing because it was an exciting finish to our matchup.
Yeah.
Watching that game on Sunday night.
And I watched it under a blanket thinking that looks miserable to me.
Yeah. So the next matchup that I have is, the brutal one. Sammy deciding to finally turn it up late in the season.
He wanted to be the spoiler, and that's exactly what he did. He spoiled Becky's season.
Yeah, so he put up 147 points, beating Becky to her 135. And officially knocking her out of the playoffs.
Wow.
Because of Malik also winning. So Joe didn't do his part. Sammy didn't do his part, and now Becky is out of the playoff race. But, Sammy, we know how he is. He's super competitive. He wants to leave on a good note for the season, and I know he's going to be I believe there's a consolation bracket, so I'm sure he's going to try to get 9th place or whatever it is that he can get up to.
He's optimistic. He walked in through our office door here, and first thing you hear is, I got to win.
Right. So he got 19 points basically from Jordan Love, having another solid game against Miami on Thursday night. A.J. Brown, kind of pedestrian against Baltimore. You would have expected a lot more passing, but when Saquon Barkley is just running the ball like he is, what do you need to pass for? DeAndre Hopkins having a solid game for Kansas City. Jonathan Taylor getting back on track a little bit, 96 yards and a receiving touchdown. James Cook, the one that destroyed Becky's night on Sunday night, having 107 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown, 19 points, right after Christian McCaffrey got out with his knee injury.
Yeah.
And so right after Becky saw McCaffrey leave the field, James Cook ran, 60 yards for a touchdown or something like that?
Yeah.
And
plus.
completely flipped the matchup, unfortunately. Hunter Henry continuing to be kind of an underrated tight end for New England. Devon Achane, 8 catches, a touchdown, and then 56 receiving yards. I think he had 30 rushing yards or something. It's not showing up on the thing. Let me open it up.
He's having a monster season.
He had 14 yards rushing.
14 yards rushing, and somehow managed to put up
that's
21 points.
Yeah, and last week he had 32 rushing yards, but he had 20 points because he had 2 touchdowns receiving. So he continues to be almost Alvin Kamara-like in the way that he plays, where he just gets so many catches that he gives you that solid floor every week. And then Josh Jacobs, 74 receiving yards with a rushing touchdown, 43 rushing yards, also doing really well, giving Sammy 21 points. And then on Becky's side, everybody played all right, but Jalen Hurts had 17. He's been kind of down again just because they've been running the ball like crazy. Jackson Smith and Jigba didn't really do a whole lot, but that's about where he's been averaging. George Pickens got in the end zone again. And then, like we mentioned, Christian McCaffrey, kind of the big bust of the season.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Despite playing in the snow, the Niners got the ball first. They drove down the field. McCaffrey was looking fantastic.
Yeah.
Every carry, he'd get 7, 8, 9, 10 yards, and he looked like he was going to have a big, big day. And I'm sure Becky was excited to see him out there in the snow playing the way he did. And then all of a sudden, I just remember seeing the one play where he takes the handoff in the backfield and then just went down untouched. And I didn't realize the play before that is when he had injured himself.
Right.
And I'm like, no. I mean, I have nothing invested in McCaffrey. I don't have him on any of my fantasy teams. But as a football fan, I just didn't want to see him go down again.
Yeah, right.
And when he left on a cart, I'm like, oh, my gosh, what a disaster for everyone who not only took him in the first round, but more likely took him with the first pick of the draft. And just when you think you get him back for the playoffs, he's pretty much done for the season.
Yeah, and I want to pick your brain a minute just because we've seen this happen a couple times now where, we had that stretch where Christian McCaffrey got drafted. He was amazing, breaking fantasy. Like, if you got him, you're almost guaranteed to make the playoffs. And he was just so much farther ahead of everybody in fantasy, at least. And then he had a string of injuries, and everybody's like, oh, man, how can I, trust this guy? And then he falls in drafts. And then finally last year, he's back to Christian McCaffrey, basically won me my league last year. But now he's back to the injury.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you take the risk next year, knowing that he should be fully healthy, but he still has that injury history? And it's like, where do you go? Do you pick him because he could win your league, or do you stay away because it's just terrifying of the injury history?
I stay away. Whether it's an auction draft or a snake draft, the risk is too great there. I don't want to waste a number one pick or a first round pick on someone who might not give you a full season. And I know that could potentially happen with any player. But McCaffrey just sort of has that history. And so, I stayed away from him at the draft this year. And even if I would have had the first pick in the draft, I don't think I would have gone McCaffrey. And I know I was actually relieved not getting the first pick in one of the snake drafts. I think I had pick number 2 or 3 or something. And I was relieved because I didn't have to decide that. It was decided for me that McCaffrey went first in the draft. And then I ended up with Bijan in one draft and Breece Hall in another draft. So I'm glad I wasn't in the situation where I had to make that decision. But come draft day 2025, even with the first pick in the draft, I can't go McCaffrey. Someone else is welcome to take a chance on that. And if it pays off, great. But look what happened this year. You only got a few good games out of him, and that's it.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. It's just maybe late first round, because he's not going to be the first round pick, obviously, or the first pick this year. He might even fall out of the first round, to be honest. And then maybe you think about it. But I definitely in an auction draft, I would stay far, far away just because those dollars are so valuable.
Yeah.
I feel like in a regular snake draft, there is ways that you can, pick McCaffrey and then pick some safer players down the line, and you can kind of save your draft. But in the auction setting, it's so hard to kind of lose all that money and then think that, your return on investment, so to speak, could be heavily damaged through that.
And speaking of McCaffrey, I did a 5-touchdown parlay, all running backs, and the first 4 running backs all scored touchdowns. And I deliberately picked McCaffrey, hoping that DraftKings would offer me a cash buyout, which is exactly what happened. But now you're faced with, it's McCaffrey, going on, that was Sunday night, right? And I'm like, wow, if he scores a touchdown, I win the whole schmear. And I'm like, I can't risk it. So I cashed out, won some money, and then he goes down hurt in that game, and I wiped the sweat off my brow and was like, whoa, I dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
So I got lucky that I cashed out when I did, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that were like, oh, this McCaffrey, anytime TD is easy money. And this is what you have to deal with.
Becky was talking to me about it, when I came in on Monday, and she said, he was tackled, a shoestring tackled before, like it was the play that, I can't remember if it was the drive before or if it was actually that play that he injured himself.
Yeah.
It was a shoestring tackle that he was about to get the end zone if they didn't get him.
He would have gone the distance.
So that could have been crazy, and that would have been that touchdown, like you said. So I think it's going to be really interesting just going forward for next year to see what this does to his draft stock. But it's tough because, when he's out there, he's one of the most electric players to watch. So hopefully he'll be better for next season, because right now he's out for 6 weeks. Most likely it doesn't look like the 49ers are going to make the playoffs. And even if they do, I don't know. There's a chance they could just shut him down, because they would have to make the NFC Championship game, I think, to even be able to play him.
Yeah.
So at that point, you might not want to throw off your rhythm. I don't know.
And then to add insult to injury, Mason is on IR, so now they're down to their third string running back. The Niners just can't catch a break this year.
Yeah, it's been pretty brutal for them for sure. On the bench, Becky did leave some points. She had, it's kind of funny, she had both of her tight ends kind of go crazy on the bench. She had 3 tight ends, but Trey McBride has been so good that I can't see her benching anybody else, but all of the tight ends she had blew up. Marvin Harrison had 17. Finally decided to sit him, and he struggled that game. So there's some ways that things could have been different for her, but ultimately I think she made most of the right lineup decisions.
Looking at her tight ends, that's an argument for possibly playing a tight end in the flex spot.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got some talent there, Andrews and Njoku and McBride. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, somebody dropped Mark Andrews. I won't tell you who. But he's been really good getting touchdowns, and I just couldn't deal with that back and forth for the last few weeks.
He pulled down this past weekend where he was surrounded by defenders, and just see he outextends everybody and just pulled it down. It was just, it was incredible to see.
Right. The next matchup that we have is the last matchup.
Are we there already?
We are.
Man.
And unfortunately, Malik takes another win. Back-to-back wins with not a full lineup. Joe, take it away.
It's looking at his roster prior to kickoff, prior to Thanksgiving, he has an impressive lineup. And I knew that this wasn't going to be a cakewalk. You look at his roster, Jackson McLaurin, who's been playing off the charts. Hill, who got that fluky ricochet touchdown at the end of the game. He started Mostert, who shouldn't even be in his starting lineup.
Yeah.
But McConkey, who's been on fire. Nakua, who's just playing lights out. He has an impressive roster, so I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And but when you look at my side of the ball, guys that I normally rely on, Addison, who I benched last week, put up 30 points on my bench, so I start him. He scores 9 points. Mooney, who's been playing lights out prior to the bye, comes back, puts up 5 points. Hubbard, who's just been playing so well, scoring almost every week, 2 points, including a fumble in overtime that pretty much cost his team the game. Kate Otten, who's been playing really well, 6 points. Brees Hall, 6 points. So, when the stars that you normally rely on to produce points are all producing 5, 6 points, there's no way in heck you're going to win a game. And so my whole roster was pretty much disappointing. The only one that really showed up to play was Bucky Irving, who's been playing really, really well. He might be in he's a rookie, right? So he might be in Rookie of the Year conversations, putting up over 27 points. He was the only guy who showed up to play for me.
Right.
Everyone else sort of underwhelmed. Kyron Williams, he got back into the end zone, didn't he?
Yes.
So he put up 18 points. But I wish the game was closer because I had Denver's defense, who had 2 pick sixes on Monday night. That would have been fun if that would have given me the win.
Almost had a third.
Yeah, toward the end of the game.
Yeah.
So it's a shame that the game wasn't closer because that would have been a fun way to win on a pick six. But it's frustrating to lose to a guy who's not even really trying. I mean, he did make some changes to his team, but like you said, he still has Nico Collins on his IR, right? Like he's been playing for weeks.
Yeah.
And he started a kicker who's on IR. So I'm losing to a guy who's barely making an effort. Yeah. And Kittle only put up 1.7 points.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
I can't believe I lost to this guy, man. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So luckily it didn't cost me a spot in the playoffs. Even if I lose to you this week, I'll still be on the bubble.
Right.
I'll be playing the top remaining seed more than likely. So I kind of fell backwards into the playoffs, and I'm just hoping my team can put up the points that I expect from them, and we'll see if we can get a first round win. But looking at my roster, it's just not looking likely.
Yeah, and then I keep bringing it up, but we have to remember, I will make Malik set his lineup when we get into the playoffs, and he still has Nico Collins on his IR.
Yeah.
So that will be a player that will be inserted to his starting lineup.
Imagine if he goes deep into the playoffs. That would be so frustrating.
I'm telling you, he has the roster to do it. The only good thing is that because I won't make him set his lineup until we get to the playoffs, is that by then I don't believe there will really be any good running backs that he could pick up. But I might be wrong. So that might be his biggest weakness. Is going to be his running backs. But everything else is pretty scary. So.
Yeah, he does have a good team. And this, looking at the results of this game, it reminds me of the meme that you sent me where sometimes it's nothing you do matters.
Yeah.
Like you could try so hard, like Sammy does every week. He works so hard on hitting the waiver wire and try to play the best team he could put out there, and he loses week after week. Yeah. And here I am, trying to find the best starting lineup. I'm so deep at running back, and I lose week after week, and then I lose to a guy who's just not even paying attention to his lineup. This game drives me crazy, and some days I'm like, I need to take a year off.
Mm-hmm.
It's ruining my Sundays.
Yeah. So there's this week's matchups. We are going to look at the waiver wire because there is, like we said, a lot of buys, and there are some good players that are out there. And now the biggest one of the week, with Christian McCaffrey being gone and Jordan Mason being gone, the big name right now in fantasy podcasts and news articles all over is one Isaac Guerendo.
Yeah.
He will be the lead back for the 49ers going forward. The last time that we saw him be the lead back was in week 8 against Dallas, where he had 14 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. He also caught 3 passes for 17 yards. In the game after McCaffrey left, he had 4 carries for 19 yards and a touchdown, and he did have 1 catch but went for -3 yards. So we've seen it in the past when it doesn't matter if it's McCaffrey or a guy off the street, whoever's the 49ers lead back is going to be a good fantasy player to some capacity.
Yeah, but if you're picking up Guerendo off the waiver wire and starting him this week, it's just pure desperation. And you may get some points from him, but are you a front runner if that's what you're resorting to?
It depends. I mean, I think it could be because they have pretty good matchups going forward and they are still looking for the playoffs, that he really could give you league-winning upside. The only problem is that there is Patrick Taylor is still their backup, and he probably will be mixed in a little bit. Plus, I've heard that the 49ers are going to look at signing somebody, and I'm sure it's more of, more injury insurance, but I think he could be pretty good, even in this league where, guys like Rico Dowdle, Jalen Warren, and Tony Pollard are available. Mm-hmm. But I think he poses the most upside to me, just because if San Francisco does make a little bit of a playoff push and they start playing better again to their standards, he could probably score more points than those other guys.
You do had a pretty good week this past week with Charbonnet. Mm-hmm. I believe he got into the end zone, and that might be someone worth looking at because sounds like, what's your running back's name?
Ken Walker.
Kenny Walker. Sounds like he's underperforming, and I don't know what the deal is, if he's entirely healthy or what, but Charbonnet got a surprising number of carries.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that we mentioned, I think, last week that, if you have, if you're the guy that has Kenneth Walker and you have an available spot on your bench, just pick up Charbonnet so you have that insurance policy if anything changes late in the season. This is the time when you want to, make sure you're ready to go if some catastrophic injury happens. So some solid running backs that are out there to replace if you have anybody on bye. Thinking of like Brian Robinson or Derrick Henry. Forgot Derrick Henry's going to be on bye this week.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be pretty crazy. But I think I like Rico Dowdle the best just because, look at the matchup. He's playing Cincinnati. And like I just said, Cincinnati's defense has been pretty terrible. I would then probably say Tony Pollard because he's going against Jacksonville, which also is a good matchup. Then I'd probably say Isaac Guerendo just because being a part of that 49ers offense can be so good. As far as wide receivers go.
Boy, in our league, there's a name jumping out at me, and I believe he's a free agent in a couple of other fantasy leagues. But that performance that Judy had on Monday night has to have people rushing to the waiver wire and putting in their requests. He was unstoppable in those conditions on Monday night, and he just looked fantastic.
Yeah, pretty crazy. He had 40 points, 9 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown. So not going to repeat that performance, obviously, but, I mean, he's been really good ever since Jameis Winston has taken over. He's had double-digit fantasy points since week 8. He went over 100 2 weeks ago against New Orleans. And even the last time they played Pittsburgh, he had 6 catches for 85 yards for 14 points. And that was in the snow, like really bad snow. So playing Pittsburgh again, even though they are a good defense, it just seems like Jerry Jeudy, the way that they use him, it doesn't line up with the way that these cornerbacks are playing that are typically shutting down wide receivers. So something to look at The only other problem I would say is that after Pittsburgh, he plays Kansas City. So that's another kind of bad matchup. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore at this point how good he's been playing. Jacoby Myers, I think he would be over Jerry Jeudy for me this week just because he's playing Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay, they can't stop anybody. If you're going into overtime against the Panthers, that's bad.
Kirk Cousins' biggest games of the season were both against Tampa Bay.
Right.
So, yeah, you got to be licking your chops if you have a quarterback or a wide receiver facing Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and Las Vegas, they have not the greatest quarterback play, but Aiden O'Connell is much better than Desmond Ridder, who would have been their backup after Minshew got hurt. But Aiden O'Connell came off of IR, and he's looked pretty good in his games so far. So I think Jacoby Myers would be number one for me, then probably Jerry Jeudy. And then it stinks that they both have bad matchups, but Adam Thielen had a huge game against Tampa Bay.
And he had a touchdown taken away from him. They said that they couldn't overturn the call because you didn't see the ball from the various angles. One was blocked by the goalpost, and one you just saw Thielen's back. But I'm convinced that was a touchdown. He was angry when they said that the play stood, but he could have had a much bigger day. And it was.
Yeah.
I'm a Thielen fan. I loved him when he was with Minnesota, and it was nice to see him have the game that he had.
Yeah, and Bryce Young has been playing a lot better, so they've had a pretty good connection the last couple weeks. And the Thielen's like the guy that you just think he's going to run out of steam at some point, because I think he's like 33 or 34 at this point, and he just keeps coming to play, and he's been around for a long time now. The other guy I was going to bring up was Devontae Adams, and I think that's partially why Breece Hall has struggled so much last week, especially. Aaron Rodgers, the Jets season is basically over, and I think Aaron Rodgers at this point is just trying to justify bringing Devontae Adams over because he targeted him so many times last week, and he ended up getting in the end zone. I think he only caught 5 or 6 balls. Caught 5, but he was targeted 12 times.
Wow.
For only 66 yards and a touchdown. So just the volume alone, I think, is a big deal. I dropped them a couple weeks ago just because they had been struggling, but, it seemed like even more so Aaron Rodgers was trying to force him the ball.
And I would just steer clear of the Jets. I mean, they're a disaster.
That's totally fair.
Fans are wearing bags on their heads.
Yeah.
And I'd be shocked if Rodgers came back to that team. He's been a disaster. And it's affecting everyone around him. I mean, Breece Hall, you stack the deck, at the line to stop Breece Hall, and you challenge Rodgers to throw, and he just hasn't been good. So the Jets are a mess, and I regret drafting Breece Hall. I really do.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. And then I don't think we have any real big tight end issues as far as bye weeks go. I mean, Mark Andrews, but Becky has him. And then Washington has Zach Ertz. Hunter Henry will be on bye. So I guess there's a couple key tight ends that are going to be on bye this week. I don't know if Dalton Kincaid's going to be back this week. The one kind of glaring guy that's sticking out to me is your guy, Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, he's been dealing with injuries. I don't know if it was a concussion. He missed multiple games in a row, and I just couldn't give up that bench spot. So I flat out dropped him, knowing that people weren't going to be clamoring for him.
Yeah.
Looking at our waiver wire, Disley has been playing really, really well. So, they're playing KC, but if you're looking to fill a bye week absence, Disley might be someone to consider.
The only thing that's scary to me, Disley had 1 target last week.
Yeah.
And no catches. But it was a weird game. I will agree.
Yeah.
And the only reason I bring up Ferguson is because he's playing against Cincinnati. Even though he plays for Dallas and it's Cooper Rush starting, just his schedule is really good. So
there's also a guy who's been a big thorn in your side, Noah Gray.
Yeah, Noah Gray. Or any Travis Kelce owner for that matter. Noah Gray has been outscoring him for the most part.
Yeah.
Luckily, Noah Gray didn't get in the end zone last week, but I would have been furious if he did again. But he's still got 6 targets, 4 catches for 58 yards, so they're definitely using him.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be the last time that he takes touchdowns away. And, again, it's one of those things. you just want to be attached to good offenses. So yeah, I think that's a good suggestion as well.
I might be looking at quarterbacks this week.
Okay.
On the waiver wire because
there's some big quarterbacks that are out. Lamar Jackson, Bo Nix.
Yeah. I have on my roster
Jaden Daniels is big.
Yeah. I have Purdy, who I'm thinking of just flat out dropping because he just doesn't have anything to work with anymore, and he's been dealing with injuries.
Yeah.
I've been starting Stafford in all my leagues. He got a questionable tag just recently, and I don't know if I can rely on Stafford this week. He's got a tough matchup, so I might be hitting the waiver wire for a Sam Darnold or somebody like that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good options. Sam Darnold definitely being one. Playing Atlanta. Atlanta's defense has been struggling quite a bit. We mentioned it. Russell Wilson, he's been kind of quietly having a good season ever since he's taken over. Now, again, I don't think he's going to throw for 414 yards every game, but he's been really solid. And this week he's going to play against Cleveland, which also ties into my next suggestion, Jameis Winston. Just because they throw the ball so much because I don't know if I think it's their offensive line is kind of struggling. Nick Chubb obviously is still recovering. It takes a long time to come back from that kind of injury. So they don't run the ball that well. They don't run the ball that much. And to have a guy like Jameis who is not afraid to throw it, threw for 497 yards last night, 4 touchdowns. Yes, he did have 3 picks.
Yeah, I was going to say you get those picks in exchange, but
I mean, the picks are -2, the touchdowns are +4, so it's even, but just getting so much yardage and stuff. And then if he does have a good game and, maybe only has 1 or 2 picks, then you feel a lot better about it. So
Pittsburgh's a tough defense, but we said earlier that there were some really good defenses that
Denver was supposed to be
vulnerabilities.
Denver was supposed to be a really good defense, and for some reason they just didn't want to put Pat Surtain on Jerry Jeudy. One of the wildest things I've ever seen. But so there's options. Caleb Williams, again, he's been playing pretty good as of lately. Getting 3 passing touchdowns again against the Lions. Going to play against San Francisco. Minnesota gets the Lions again. So his schedule is really favorable. So Caleb Williams could be a good fill-in for this week, but also going forward. And then, I think those are the guys. Any streaming defenses that we can look at? We've been doing that a lot. Oh, number 1, New Orleans. They're top of the projections. They're playing the Giants. So the Giants just they're awful. So I think the New Orleans Saints are a good streaming defense this week. Tennessee could be good because Trevor Lawrence is going to be out again.
Well, you can pick the defense for either one of those teams, Tennessee or Jacksonville.
Yeah, right.
I have a feeling that's going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, and even we talk about Tampa Bay being a terrible defense, giving up a lot of points, but they're still okay fantasy-wise where they get some points here and there. So that's not a terrible idea. And then Miami against the Jets, that's not a bad one either. The Jets, like we said, they can't win games, so they keep messing things up somehow. But there's some options out there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look to week 14. The matchups that we're vying for playoff seeding. Top of my list is me and you. I could have had a chance to kick you out of the playoffs. But like you said, you're considering a lot of moves. So what are you contemplating outside of your quarterback move? Are you keeping the wide receivers in? You swapping anything out?
And we're ready. First thing I do when I wake up Tuesday morning is grab my phone and start tweaking my lineup. I've been really happy with Kyron Williams. Hubbard has me scratching my head, like, what am I going to get from him on a week-to-week basis?
Especially against Philadelphia this week. That'll be tough.
I don't know. Bucky's got a questionable tag next to him. That makes me a little nervous. I do regret last week leaving Thomas Jr., wide receiver, on the bench last week. He put up like 18 points.
Mm-hmm.
Might work him back into the lineup.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would start Chubb against that Pittsburgh defense. So,
did you see enough from Pacheco to put him in?
I was optimistic. He got some carries and he looked healthy. So there's a possibility that might put him in against the Chargers. We'll see.
The other nice thing about that too is because they played him last week, That was a good warm-up game. This week they can give him a couple more carries.
Yeah.
Then you can have a really good sample size to make for round 1 of the playoffs of if you think he can win you your matchup. So
yeah. Luckily, this upcoming weekend is meaningless. I mean, win or lose, we're both in the playoffs. So,
right.
You can maybe take some chances this week, but
Yeah.
it's almost like a scrimmage game, just waiting for the playoffs to get
Right.
here.
Like I said, for me, there's a little bit more on the plate because there's a wild chance that I could make that 2 seed, but a lot of things have to go right, so I'm not really looking at it. My lineup is set. I don't think I'm really going to make any moves. I do have to pick up a kicker, and I've already made my waiver claim for that. No big deal. But I'm not going to mess with my lineup anymore. Juwan Jennings, I'm debating about dropping him as well. Similar to your Brock Purdy thought of just 49ers being in shambles. I don't know if I even want that distraction. Even if he comes out and has a really good week this week, I just don't know if I want to trust them. So I might just drop him to get him out of my head.
Yeah.
I did decide to bench Aaron Jones. I think it's just been a couple weeks in a row. He just hasn't looked the greatest. So I picked up Keenan Allen last week, and he's been getting a good rapport with Caleb Williams. So I'm going to start him.
He had a big Thanksgiving game.
Yeah. So my lineup pretty much set unless there's any midweek injuries. Like I said, I'm got to pick up a kicker, but we'll see how that goes tomorrow. The next matchup that I have is Becky versus Tracy. Unfortunately, this could have been for Becky's playoff spot if things went correctly. However, it's just if Becky wants to get a nice win in week 14 and make Tracy a little bit worried heading into the playoffs. That's all I think it would do. Right now, Becky's heavily favored, but as we can see, Tracy needs to fill in for Joe Mixon and Zay Flowers.
Ooh.
Those are 2 flex positions that she needs. So she's going to have to figure that out. Brian Robinson also on bye. Javonte Williams on bye. So she's going to have to do some ad dropping because Josh Downs, he's also on bye. So, yeah, she's in that similar situation to what she was in week 12, where she is lucky that she's locked into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But, she's not going to feel good about going into the playoffs necessarily just because you're going to see maybe a lower score, and that's just going to be harmful, I think, to your mental overall. And you have to make some roster moves if she decides to. Maybe it's one of those situations where she doesn't feel like she wants to make her decision because she doesn't want to drop anybody.
Yeah, with the playoffs looming, I don't think you have to do anything drastic. You play to win, but you don't want to drop anyone that you're going to want in the playoffs. So
right.
I just think, you start what you have. If you get a loss, that's fine because she's going to be the top seed in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll tell her she can definitely drop Javonte Williams.
He lost a lot of carries last night to McLaughlin?
Yeah.
Was that his name?
Yeah, it's been bad. He is. I don't know what happened to Javonte Williams this year, but it's been rough. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun matchup, I think, just for Becky to try to salvage something to end the season with. Even though Tracy's got some guys on bye, it would still feel nice for the morale to knock off the top seed. The other big matchup, these 2 buddies, Ian taking on Sammy. Sammy's got a little win streak going.
Yeah.
He wants to get another win. He wants to knock off Ian. Like I said, it could hurt Ian losing that first bye. Then Ian has to play in the first round of the playoffs. I'm sure Sammy would love to see that. Right now, it's really close, but it doesn't look like either of them have their set lineups yet.
Well, Ian, I don't think, has a single bye.
He has Ramondre Stevenson.
Oh, there he is.
It's down further. Oh, and then he has Justin Tucker and Houston defense.
Oh, geez. How did I overlook those? So, yeah, he's got to fill in a couple of gaps. So.
Yeah, and then Sammy's got to fill in for Jonathan Taylor and Hunter Henry.
Ooh, that's a big loss.
And for Ian, the thing that always I always hate swapping out my kickers and defense, especially if you have good ones. He could potentially just outright drop Justin Tucker if he wanted to because he's been struggling so bad. But
yeah,
that's a risk. I don't know how you feel about it. And then Houston's defense, they've been pretty good this year, and I don't know what their schedule looks like in the playoffs. They have Miami, KC, and Baltimore. Okay, you can probably drop them for the fantasy playoffs, to be honest. But that always makes me nervous, Joe, though, of just dropping your kicker and defense because, if they're that good, it's hard, but you don't want to hold 2 kickers and 2 defenses.
Yeah, I have no problem with dropping kickers and defenses
Mm-hmm.
because nobody's going to be clamoring for that kicker or defense. So
Yeah.
I really don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
Unless you have like an Aubrey. I'm not going to drop an Aubrey.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah. And Justin Tucker normally would be that kind of guy.
Right.
So it's
not lately.
Yeah. So replacing Ramondre Stevenson should be pretty easy. Ian can go with Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, basically whoever he wants. And then Sammy, in replace of Jonathan Taylor and Hunter Henry, he's got Tyrone Tracy, he's been okay, but he's had a fumbling issue.
Yeah.
And then, Sammy doesn't have a backup tight end at the moment because Dallas Goedert is injured, and I don't think he's expected to play this week. I think there's a chance he could go on IR.
Oh, wow.
So Sammy's going to have to pick up a tight end to get the upset that he wants.
Taysom Hill's not available. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And then finally, the match that kind of matters, but it doesn't matter. Malik versus Marie. And as I said before, Malik is riddled with bye weeks. Lamar Jackson's not going to play. Terry McLaurin is on bye. Harrison Butker and Buffalo defense. Oh, Buffalo defense is back. I forgot. So Harrison Butker still on IR. And then a bye from Lamar Jackson. If Malik wins this week, we might as well just give him the championship now.
Yeah, right.
Marie, she does have to replace Cortland Sutton and Derrick Henry and Michael Pittman Jr. So does she have the spots for that? Oh, yeah. She's got Najee Harris to fill in for Derrick Henry, and then she's got Calvin Ridley, probably Amari Cooper, to fill in for her wide receivers. So she should be just fine. Should easily win, and that's where I said the Sammy versus Ian matchup is huge because Marie could sneak in to that second place and get the bye, which would be pretty wild. So.
All right. I get stuck with Malik when he's practically at full strength.
Yeah.
And Marie gets him when he's devastated by buys. And who knows if he's going to put in Murray at quarterback. Is he going to make the effort to replace those bye week vacancies? We'll see.
Probably not. And then I think the crazy thing to think about, too, is that, like I said, Malik will be forced to make a lineup when we hit the playoffs. And as the standings stand right now, the person that gets to play Malik is me. And that's actually pretty terrifying. So we'll see. The standings are going to be pretty important. Right now, it would be Tracy and Ian getting the bye, with Marie playing Joe in the first round of the playoffs and me playing Malik. So I don't really want that. So I'm hoping to get a win, and maybe those two ahead of me will both lose or something like that. Makes me a little nervous. Or I guess if no, they both have to lose. Never mind. So, yeah, playoffs are set, but the standings are not. A couple people going after that bye week, which is highly coveted. And then the rest of us just hoping to have some good morale going into the fantasy playoffs. But good luck to everybody in Week 14. I know in crazier leagues that this bye is going to be really tough for a lot of people vying for playoff spots. But good thing is there's good waiver wire options out there. I know Garendo is available even in the deepest of leagues. So there's good opportunities for you out there. And good luck heading into the playoffs. And we'll be back next week to talk about the playoff matchups. Crazy.
All right. Good luck.